it's so cool and new that I want to touch it, but I know I shouldn't. So I'll stay back. Hi, OP friends. So I have a new little toy today. It's a Yeti microphone, and I'm testing it out for the first time today. So hopefully it's not too weird or crazy, or my voice sounds offensive in your ears. But my brother, who used to be in video editing and stuff, he actually is letting me borrow this microphone. So thank you, Kyle. If you guys are joining me for the first time, I come from the Myers-Briggs world, and I am typed as an INFP. And as we know, there's only 16 personality types in Myers-Briggs, so I have been branching out and learning about OP, or objective personality. I have gone through many preliminary types. My unofficial type at the moment is MF, SIFI, sleep, consume, blast, play, which would make me an ISTJ jumper, which is very weird. But I am talking to some other people who are very distinguished in the typing world, and their initial assessment of me so far after just the first run through is MF, FESE, and TESE. So that's very weird to me. That would make me either an ENFJ jumper or an ENTJ jumper. Very weird. If you guys are also going from Myers-Briggs land into OP land, you know how traumatic this experience is, and it's because the definitions of the functions are so different. In Myers-Briggs, it really is how you see the world and what you identify with, but in OP, it's more your functions determine what you're responsible for, what you feel responsible for, whether you are aware of it or not. With that distinction, I am going into this with an open mind, just wanting to learn more about myself and about other people. So I'm currently learning more about the animals in objective personality type, and the first team that typed me did come back as me being sleep, consume, blast, play, which I thought was spot on when I initially got it. Since then, many people have said that my play energy is actually much higher. And this is interesting because I've always attributed my high play energy in these videos to the fact that I just love OP and personality typing. And this is just something I'm excited about. My energy tends to go up. I'm a lot more enthusiastic. So I'm not really like this if you were to meet me in just everyday life. So I kept hammering that distinction in, but everybody kept saying, no, no, no. Whether you think that that's the case in your videos, in all of the videos where you're answering, even in like your written posts and your Instagram, there is high play energy. So I am becoming more open to the fact that I'm probably a little bit higher in play energy. Anyway, I am very excited to get my next assessment back, because I believe the team that is typing me is one of the more notorious typing teams that exist in objective personality, of course, aside from Dave and Shan themselves. I do hope to get typed by them eventually, but I think it's going to be a while until I'm able to. Today, I wanted to go back into my INFP self, and where I feel a little more comfortable talking about things. I wanted to talk about INFP and therapy. Coming from the Myers-Briggs world, INFPs do have a tendency to fall into depression, self-esteem issues, just we're very hard on ourselves. And because we get caught in the FI-SI loop, we're very in our own worlds, and it's very hard to pull us out when we're in that darkness. And that is something that I've dealt with my entire life. And I think that my issues were compounded by the fact that I really cared about what everyone thought about me. But because I wasn't going back to the tribe and pinging off of them, I was only in my own head, making up all these things about what other people were saying about me. And you can imagine how that just grew and grew and grew into this just toxic, cancerous state where I just depression, right? Depression. I'm sure many of you INFPs can relate to depression and the darkness and the isolation and the loneliness of feeling so stuck in that despair and not being able to get out. I want to talk a little bit about my experience with therapy. I think that therapy is something that everybody should consider, everybody should try. We live in a society where we are so stressed out, we are so anxious, we are overweight, we are addicted, we're working ourselves to death and trying to maximize our productivity, trying to balance our social life. We just get to a point where we are constantly just numbing ourselves, isolating ourselves, all kinds of unhealthy coping mechanisms. And half the time, we don't even realize it ourselves. I do think that therapy is very good for absolutely everybody, but I do think that not all therapists are the same. Not all quality of therapists are the same. You're gonna have to go through many therapists until you find one that vibes with you. So I would say the system itself is not really designed to be the most helpful at the moment. I think it's going to continue to be a growing field in the future. I mean, especially with the mental health issues that are arising from COVID and isolation and grief. I do think that mental health is going to be so, so, so important. I mean, it always was. It always was. But I think as a society, we couldn't collectively agree that it was important because people who have never experienced mental illness or depression or anxiety, it's not their fault. They just cannot relate. But for those of us who have experienced it, we know how bad it is. We know how dark it is. At least for me, it is the most harrowing, dark, despair time. It's so painful that I don't want anyone else to have to go through that. And so for me, I'm very passionate about mental health. That is actually the reason why I am back in school for psychology. When I first went to college, I wanted to graduate in psychology, but I was discouraged from it. This is not the fault of any single person or anything like that. I was very young, naive, unsure of myself. I knew that I always had an interest in psychology. I was always everyone's unofficial therapist. My friends and family would just come to me because they knew that I was a safe space where they could talk. And I loved it. I loved it. I'm a great listener. That sounds really weird to say. I don't know. I just care about people and how they're feeling. And I always feel like I want to make them feel better. I always want to do that. Okay, so this obviously correlates to the whole INFP healer thing. When I first was tested as an INFP in high school and I saw mediator healer, I was so embarrassed about it and I just stuffed it in my backpack because everybody else was getting things like debater, the CEO type, or the architect, or the engineers. I just thought, what the heck? Healer, mediator, like this is useless. I didn't identify with it when I was growing up. Obviously, it turned out to be true. When I first went to college, I wanted to major in psychology, but I ended up going into business. My dad is an entrepreneur. He's always been in business. I think I just grew up talking business with him, talking business ideas with him. It was something that I did enjoy. I majored in business marketing and I went to an entrepreneur school. But the thing about INFPs, and maybe you guys relate, is that we are very strategic, we are very creative. So we do thrive in the business world. But the part where I just fall apart is the organization, the follow-up, the execution of things, the delegation of things, and even just the person-to-person communication. So business is something that I love. I think it's fun, and I love the creative aspects of it, the branding, the consumer behavior, all of that. So I don't regret going into business, but I am going back into school for psychology because I'm very, very passionate about helping people. Specifically, I'm passionate about lifting people out of their darkness. I don't know that depression is something that you ever actually get over, but I am in a much better place now than I ever was in my life. And my depression started in high school. And I believe that it happened in high school. Of course, there's so many things that contribute to it. I was one of those kids that I would stay up all night just like playing games and doing things. And so, like, first of all, I wasn't getting enough sleep. And my nutrition at the time was just atrocious. This is hard. I wanted to say I was fat. I was overweight, but I'm going to say I thought I was fat. Because of that, I fell into an eating disorder and my diet was just horrible. I would drink like a giant Diet Coke for lunch and maybe like a little protein bar that was like 100 calories. And I didn't exercise. I wasn't playing sports, anything like that. School was very, very, very difficult for me. So there was just layers and layers of things that were working against me, or maybe I perceived them to be working against me in high school. And so I just did not do well. That was a very, very dark time for me. My therapy journey began in high school. This is where my parents finally caught wind that I had this bad eating disorder, and they were the ones to just sort of scoop me up and throw me into therapy. And at that time, I was seeing a general practitioner doctor, a nutritionist every week, a therapist, and I had to see a psychiatrist for medication. That was my first look into the world of therapy and psychiatry from a first-person perspective. And I just remember at that time, a lot of kids were, ashamed to be going to therapy, or even just for other people to know that they had to go to therapy or to see a psychiatrist. It was this huge shame thing. But I remember that I weirdly liked it. I liked it. And it was because I had so much that I didn't understand and so much that was plaguing me that it was almost as though I could unpack that with someone. Because as an INFP, I am so obsessed with self-understanding, self-growth, self-knowledge. Therapy was my way of being able to explore all that. And so I never minded when I had a therapist appointment. Sign me up, let's go. I was all about it. That was my first look at therapy. And I think at the time, it was just this like older lady who seemed like she didn't really care about her job too much, but I sucked as much knowledge. So it was an okay first experience. Since then, I've seen many therapists, many psychiatrists. For example, in college again was a little bit difficult for me because I'm really bad at time management and just like waking myself up and going to class. So I just felt so much pressure of like how am I going to pass all my classes, and I was still struggling with the whole making friends thing. So those situations were very intimidating to me. And so again, in college I did have a therapist that I saw regularly. That one I don't really remember too much about. You're gonna experience therapists who are good and bad, and it's not necessarily their fault or your fault. There is a matching process involved with therapists, especially if they are not from the same background or ethnicity or culture or things as you. It's not going to vibe as closely. My most recent therapist, he's actually an older white man, and he's married to a Black woman, and they have an adopted Asian son. He comes from a very, very diverse background, but I went to go see him because this was recently. I think I started seeing him maybe a year ago. I started seeing him because depression is something that I could never fully control in my life, and when it pops up, it consumes me completely, to the point where no matter what anyone on the outside says, I cannot get myself out of that mental state, and it just brings me down and down and down and down. I knew that I had to do something about this. I had to do something about this because, as you guys might know, depression not only makes you, withdraw from the things that you used to do, and it makes you not care about your responsibilities, but because you're in such a bad, bad, bad state, if other people start to nitpick at you and say, like, why are you being so lazy or whatever, like, you become nasty back, because it's like, why don't you fucking understand that I'm just not in a good place right now, and like my entire world is falling down. So that was kind of the situation that I was in, and I could tell that things in my life were falling apart, relationships in my life were falling apart, and I knew I needed to do something about it. So even though it wasn't my most darkest point, I thought I should go see a therapist and nip this in the bud. Because by this point I had already been well into typology, well into psychology, and just all the podcasts and books and things that I've read, up until this point. It was a very fun experience because it was almost as though he respected the fact that I came in with all of this knowledge, and he would tell me all the time, you are the most self-aware client that I've ever had. And obviously I took that as a compliment. It was really cool because we almost saw each other as equals, and it almost became a mutual, like, wait a minute, like, my epiphany would lead to something of his epiphany, and we were just discovering things together. And it was very cool. It even got to a point where he would send me videos and I would recommend him movies, and it was just things that we were able to talk about and unpack. And I'll never forget, so he's a very, very religious person. He doesn't swear or smoke or stuff like that. I remember I recommended the movie Joker to him because of how well it portrayed mental illness. And he actually went out and watched it with his wife, and he is actually like a part-time pastor or something. So I was kind of nervous about suggesting that movie to him, but he actually went out and saw it, and he said, wow, that was incredible. And so we were just like connecting over this movie. I really began to see him more as a friend than a therapist. And so I got to a point where I thought, okay, so clearly I have all the knowledge and the tools that I need in order to help myself. So do I need a therapist anymore? And so this is when I started trying to psychoanalyze myself. Even though I have been doing that from the past, I thought, okay, I think I can do this now. And in the past, I have been prescribed, SSRIs, SNRIs, stimulant medication, all kinds of things to help me with my mental health. But the thing is, they would all work for a little while, and then they would stop working, and all you're left with is the side effects. And like that is just not worth it. It's not worth it. And on top of that, you have to go see a psychiatrist every month in order to get that prescription. You have to pay for the prescription. And then after a while, when it stops working, you have to go back and repeat it and try a new drug all over again. It just wasn't working. It just wasn't working. And so the only thing that has ever worked for me in terms of like a substance to help me with my mental health is psilocybin. And you guys might know this as magic mushrooms, but I'm going to call it psilocybin so we can avoid using the street name and give it a little bit more respect and credibility. But this is one of the things that got me wanting to go back into psychiatry. And now my dream job is to become a psychedelic therapist. And if you guys have never tried psilocybin before, the best way I can describe it is that you're basically swallowing a therapist, and you become your own therapist. And what it did for me is all of the deeply ingrained pathways in my brain that told me that I was fat, that I was stupid, that I was ugly, that I was not lovable, all these negative thoughts that had just gotten deeper and deeper over years and years and years. What psilocybin did for me was it essentially lifted that, and I was able to actually see things from other perspectives and to see things objectively. And while this is all happening, you're kind of returned to this state of wonder as a child again. And everything is so beautiful and precious and special. And every single time I do psilocybin, it's a different experience. But what's amazing about it is that you can literally write a list of the things you want to confront yourself about. And under psilocybin, just go through that list and think about it. And even after the trip is over, which lasts about 3 to 4 hours, even after it ends, you have like a few days of that whole afterglow period where your thinking is still different, but in a good way. You feel lighter. And I think that in everyday life, we're always trying to shove it down. We're always trying to numb it. And we're always trying to distract ourselves by, just our phones and social media and TV and internet. And we're not actually okay with being ourselves. And what psilocybin did for me was help me to just reconnect back to myself and to stop believing the lies. It lifted up all the ingrained neural pathways that have been set over the years, and it helped me to just lift that and to consider other possibilities and to reconnect in that way. And that's the best way I can describe it. So I am a huge advocate of psilocybin for mental health and especially depression. In my opinion, it's just absolutely unfair that the government decided to make these illegal in the 70s. And I am a testament to it. I've been on antidepressants. I've been seeing psychiatrists. I've been going to therapy, and nothing has worked for me the way psilocybin mushrooms have. That is my passion and my career goal at the moment. And so this is something that I'll probably continue to talk about in the future is psilocybin. And I thought it might even be interesting if in the future I maybe eat some psilocybin and I talk here, or I even do like a self psychoanalysis of issues I need to confront while on psilocybin. Like, is that something you guys would be interested in seeing? Because I'm totally cool with sharing that. If you guys have experience with psilocybin or you have questions about it, please talk to me. That is something that I'm very passionate about. I love personality typing and I love psilocybin. Yeah. So I think that INFPs would definitely benefit from therapy, especially early in life. But don't forget that you are also a type that would be a good therapist. So there will be a point in your therapy where you realize maybe I know as much or more than my therapist. And at that point, you need to decide for yourself, what do I do from here? Especially for those of you who are studying psychology and who are into typology and just are obsessed with self-understanding, you're going to reach that point. My recommendation is try psilocybin. Okay, well, that's all I wanted to share with you guys today. Thank you again for watching my ridiculous video. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.